What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Crew 2. And well, as y'all know, it is Wednesday, which means a new summit is now live here on the game. And for this week, we have the Street Showdown, which is going to bring us a chance to get the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 6 GSR, Flow Edition, Drift Edition. I would say that's one of the longest names in the entire game. But luckily, guys, the Mitsubishi is actually going to be a pretty dope car, though. I really do love the body kit on this car. Plus, you do get to drive it. I will jump more into that here in a quick second, but in gold we have a blue smoke. Then in silver we have some parts for the Corvette ZR1, which is always going to be a nice touch. But moving over to the next summit, though, Cities Championship is going to bring us a Fame Magnet boosted for the Alpha GP category, and I would probably say this is going to be pretty dang useful if you guys do like farming. Having pure and or followers on a Fame Magnet set is by far going to be one of the best part rolls you can get. Besides that, I would most likely go after like a followers and or bucks, but I would say, guys, that's actually going to be a great set for farming. And then in gold we have a dark blue nitro, which is going to be a blue nitro. And then in silver we have a Camaro SS, which I would say most players do own this car. And if you guys do own these vehicles, by the way, you of course do get some money back for them. And then jumping right into this summit, it's most likely going to be exactly what you would expect. This entire summit is going to be a mixed event summit, guys, all Alpha GP, which I would probably say is going to be a pretty dang fun summit. I can't wait for this one. Some are going to be no restriction, then some are going to be based on different vehicles. And you guys probably did notice the Expo R Spear Racing ED and or the Yasa designs also going to be in this summit. Both of these vehicles are going to be available on the 16th to purchase with bucks, so I would definitely recommend doing that because the Yasa design is probably one of the coolest looking Alpha GP cars in the entire game for that matter. But moving over to the next summit, the Brits is actually coming back once again, so the TVR Griffith Peppermint Edition is actually a pretty awesome looking car. It's also going to be insanely unique for that matter, being a V8. I would probably say, guys, this car is most likely going to be insanely rare. I do not remember the last time I actually saw someone drive this car, so I would definitely recommend going after this vehicle when it does come out in a couple of weeks. And then in gold we have the Union Jack tire, and then finally in silver we have a legendary half set boosted for the touring cars, and that's also going to be a second part of the first one for that matter. But and then moving over to the next summit that we can actually see is going to be the United States East Speed Tour. This one's going to have the USST band tire, which actually does look kind of cool. It's also going to have a lot of blue lines going on it, so I would probably say that would actually look kind of cool, unlike the Pulse car that you do see on the picture. And then in gold we have the legendary half set boosted for the Rallycross category, and I would probably say a lot of these Nitro Chemist sets really are going to be worth it. This summit, guys, is also going to be a week away from Motorfest, which is kind of insane. So I would probably say a lot of these vehicle part sets are most likely not going to be needed. And I really do think a lot of players are most likely going after vanities at this point. And they are most likely going after cars as well, because I do feel like a lot of part sets like the one that's in this summit is probably not going to be a lot of people's priority, especially because this is like the second to last week until Motorfest releases. And then moving over to the summit here, starting off with the slalom. So for this one, guys, I once again decided to use a monster truck. Funnily enough, the first time I did this, I actually used a drift car, and I did score around like 27,000 points, so it definitely was not like the best vehicle to use. I do also believe I got like 147,000 points, but if you do want a lot more points, you can use something like a monster truck. I actually scored insanely close to like rally raid vehicles, so if you guys do have a score breaker set on your class, you can basically run any vehicle of your choice on these. But moving over to the next skill is going to be a speed trap. I would most likely say you're only really going to see a Corvette Stingray on these. Do keep in mind, guys, once again, I do tend to mention this pretty often, but just in case players might be wondering how you get over like 410 miles per hour, you will indeed have to slipstream at least one other person to do so. I honestly did like one run on this and I was like, you know what? I would probably say that's going to be enough. But moving over to the next skill is going to be another buoy smashing. And for this, guys, I did decide to run the Vector V40R. If you were wondering, though, the 1414 Demon can easily get this one completed. And the main reason for that is going to be the size of the Grand Canyon buoy smashing, because I did notice this one's actually going to be pretty dang big overall, so you can use a bigger boat like the 1414 Demon and still get this one completed, which does make this a bit better because that way if you're not the biggest fan of the V40R, at least you can run the 1414 Demon, which I would still say to this day is by far going to be like the best power boat in the Crew 2. Who knows, maybe in Motorfest that might end up changing, but moving over to the first event is going to be a street race. So for this, guys, you have to use the Nissan Skyline GTR, and to my surprise, I actually do like the way this car does turn. Is it going to be like the best street car in the game? Most likely not, but I really do love the way this car does handle and or drive though, and it is going to be decently fast as well, so I do find this car to be pretty dang fun, and it did actually do pretty dang well, especially on the San Francisco Commute. There is so many dang turns in this race, and I would probably say that's probably going to be the biggest challenge in that race. But now moving over to the next event though, you actually get to drive the Mitsubishi. And for this, guys, do keep in mind this car is going to be forced. So it is going to be like level 150. So it's obviously not the fastest thing out there. If you were having issues with this event, one of the biggest things I noticed is all you guys will have to do on this one is to use your nitrous a bit more on the corners. That way you can actually keep the drift up because obviously this car is insanely slow. I did notice being in second to third gear around most of the corners is most likely going to be the best way to do this one. I honestly cannot wait to test out this car when it's actually maxed out with different settings as well. But moving over to the next event is going to be a hypercar race, so it's going to be going to Vegas. For this, guys, do keep in mind the Corvette C7 does not have a top speed of a Bugatti. I do believe this car does around like 298 miles per hour, so it's not going to be slow by any means, but it's also not the fastest hypercar. And I do know with a Nitro Chemist set you can easily max this thing out. But the biggest thing on this race though is to go as fast as you obviously can, but also watch out for those corners because they do come up pretty dang fast in certain areas, so I would be a tad careful on that. Now moving over to the next event is going to be a drag race with the lovely Dodge SRT Viper GTS. To be honest, guys, I'm not the biggest fan of the drag race class in this game, but I would probably say this is going to be a pretty easy event. Do keep in mind this race also has a pretty interesting surprise, so a lot of the drag races you obviously go as fast as you can to the end of the point. On this one you actually hit a jump and jump over a bunch of buses, so I would probably say it's going to be a tad different than some of the ones we actually see, but if you guys are looking for a crazy high score on this one, you will most likely have to slipstream, but to be honest, I would say well over 125k is definitely doable, especially solo, as long as you guys do get good shifts and or hit your nitrous at the right time. But moving over to the next event is going to be a no restriction street race, and for this one I actually decided to use the Porsche 911 Carrera 4S, which to this day is most likely going to be one of my favorite street cars in this game. Even though it's not going to be like the best street car, this thing is honestly incredible. It does have some really impressive handling, plus some great overall top speed. If you guys are using manual though, do keep in mind it is indeed an 8 speed, so you will definitely have to shift a lot more often, and I did find myself being in the wrong gear sometimes, but man is that Porsche fun. And then moving over to the final event is actually going to be a drift car into a street race. It's kind of funny because I did think this would actually happen eventually, and I would probably say you guys are going to see a lot of different mixed vehicles on this one. For me, I decided to use the Lamborghini Aventador, which I would recommend trying out here because the car is pretty decent. Do keep in mind, guys, you obviously do not grip like you normally would in like a street car, so I would also recommend being more careful around corners because these are obviously drift cars, and I did notice if you are sliding a lot more around these corners, you're most likely going to lose more speed, so I would recommend being slightly slower and or at least slowing down before you do go around that corner. That way you can try to get an extra piece of grip and or be a bit faster, but overall though, guys, I do think a lot of people are going to like this Summit. And there's also going to be a nice mix of events in this one, plus we don't have any annoying escapes, and that drift car is honestly looking pretty dang awesome. But if you guys have any questions at all, let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more insight.
you